Yeah, I'll have to do that, which will be obnoxious. Hey, we're live. We're live on a Wednesday.
If you
Like
want, I could jump in the studio and change it while we're live. It's not an
nothing
issue.
terrible could even happen today. That's how great today is. No, actually, lots of terrible things have happened today, which is at least part of why. Hey, I hope you guys out there in Readerville, Watcherville, you don't feel too bad. But we're not talking about Tails Gets Trolled today. Yeah, it was all a gag. It was, no, we
Someday.
we will someday. It'll probably be in the new year. We had some stuff come up for people, and unfortunately, yeah. Oh, somebody just left. They're like, "That's it. We're out of here." I only came to watch about Tails. So we're just gonna hang out and talk about comics and things we're working on and all the other stuff that are just loose. Just it's a hangout today.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. Story. So yeah. What's everybody been looking at? Been reading? Whatever.
I was going to ask again, do you want me to go into the studio right now and change the title?
If you would like to, feel free. Yeah. That would be perfectly fine. I don't think I even shared the link to the show out anywhere anyway. So
yeah,
it's fine. But I know that I have been going through, as I promised in a previous video, I'm going through reading and cataloging The Adventures of Kool-Aid Man. I just about finished with issue 2. Exciting for that. I'm a big fan of the Kool-Aid Man comics. I have the whole series. Did you know, Cartoonicus? I got the whole series.
I didn't hear the full sentence of what?
Yeah, I said I have the whole series of The Adventures of Kool-Aid Man, all 9 issues.
Oh, Kool-Aid Man. I got you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Did not put 2 and 2 together there. Yes.
Yeah, Tail has the kids because he didn't join and because he didn't read Tales. It's true. He chose that he did not wish to read Tales Gets Trolled at all.
Yeah.
So,
especially after my reactions to it.
Yeah. Now, of course, Taylor, you had read. Let me ask you this. This is the question I was going to ask during the Tales stream, and we're not doing that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you have, of course, are a fan of Sonic. That I happen to know this. Yes. It seems to me that there is no possible way that there is any connection. And I do not know a lot about the Sonic lore. I've never watched the cartoons. I read a few of the comics. I've played a couple of video games, watched 1.5 of the movies. Oh, Twillis got here just now.
Oh, does that change anything?
I don't know. Maybe it will.
Hey, Metal.
I literally just changed everything.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. You'd have to revert. Well, I mean, I could revert the title, but I don't have the thumbnail you use. So.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not a big deal.
I thought you guys were doing other. It was Tails Gets Trolled.
Well, we didn't know if you were showing up.
But I forgot. I did not reach out to Josh again to confirm, and I can't get a hold of him tonight. I thought everything was scheduled, and I've just been so into the day job of everything. I haven't been good about following up with people about stuff.
Gotcha. Oh, did Josh want to do Tails Gets Trolled too?
Yeah.
Okay, he'd be a good one for it.
He talked about it years ago, and I asked him last month, and he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I got the date, and he was like, "Yeah, that's good." And but I hadn't talked to him in 3 weeks, probably since just before Thanksgiving. That's not even 3 weeks. That was just 2 weeks ago. But I mean, anyway, point is, whatever it is, it's been long enough that I should have messaged him over the weekend to confirm, because I know he gets busy with his real life and everything too. So, but I was just on autopilot. So, but yeah, and then the thing is when he was, I have not read beyond the second chapter, and Taylor thought, I will only be expected to read 1 chapter, surely, so I won't read any more. And whoever, I mean,
like, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's one of those, because it's quite long. There's quite a bit and it's continued to release. I don't know how much of it you wanted to do. I think the first 1 or 2 chapters is enough to give you a snapshot of it.
Yeah, I was thinking like the first I was thinking like 2 or 3 chapters just based on how the story was moving on.
Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about it at all until I finished the first chapter, and I'm like, no, there's a little more meat on this bone that I really feel on that, and everything. But I was gonna fake it because I know that you have read it and that Josh has read it, and I
haven't read everything. I read it. I think I remember reading a chunk of it a few years ago, and then like I didn't keep up with it because he's up to like chapter 28, and I don't remember what. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's
and there's side stuff.
Yeah,
and and there's all the side quest issues that are just. It's just like, wow. Of course, I haven't read it, but I have. That's crazy. That's wild, man.
Okay.
And only since 2011.
That's true. Yeah, it's been up for. And I know he's had some ups and downs with. I think it's been on hiatus a few times. I think he lost his account once or twice on DeviantArt or something. There was some DeviantArt drama.
I can imagine.
And the creator is
read up to 2021, but I also have not engaged in it since 2021, so I don't even remember half of it.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of goes in one part of your brain and then goes out the other.
Well, and then we didn't think you were going to show up, and so before we went live, Metal is just like, should we just postpone this to like later in the schedule, and dump this in the middle of January because we've got several shows booked out already. So, I said, yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. So we were just gonna have a talking stream, just kind of a hangout, since we're already here, and then you got here, which I appreciate. So. But
I can hang out for a little.
Oh, cool, man. Are you going to postpone Tom King's Wonder Woman chapter 10? No, that is, I think, let me see when I have that on the schedule, because I think we did schedule that out already. I believe that's the first show after the new year, but I could be wrong about that.
Next week is the Spies one, right?
Yeah, next week is Spies.
Yeah.
So next week is Spies, and then no show for Christmas or New Year's Day. And then, the 8th, the first show from the new year is Wonder Woman. And then the next show, the 15th of January, is going to be Rat Fist. And then the 22nd is going to be The Addams Family. So probably then the 28th, I think it would be Tails Gets Trolled for the reals. So there we have it. Man, I haven't been booked out like this since 2021, I don't think.
Yeah, there you go.
Look at that. I'm reclaiming my show. Oh.
So should I go and change my avatar back?
Whatever you
That's up to you.
That's up to you. I'm not here to dictate avatars or anything. Dave Ishanovich, I have not seen you around in a good spell. How are you? So what has everybody been busy with? I know we've all been insanely busy.
Holidays.
That's a chunk of it, yeah.
Yeah. I was out for a couple weeks. I didn't even do my own personal streams that I do twice a week, between like Thanksgiving all the way through my birthday last week. So it's like, now I'm back in fold.
Which is great.
Isaac asks, did anyone catch the new Alien Paradiso? I'm not sure. Is that a
film?
I'm guessing it's a comic because I know the new Alien film was not titled that, if I recall.
Yeah, it's a comic from this year.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Is it Dante's Paradiso with aliens? Or?
I'm assuming
that's
not.
what it sounds like.
I'm assuming they're being ironic with the reference to Dante there.
Are we talking about the Alien franchise?
That's what
it
I'm saying.
I think franchise.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Jim Tuner has made a request. Can we interview Ginny Sparks and the Trinity? That sounds so awful. I'm not even. Is this real? Is that a real thing? I've not heard about it. I don't know. Maybe it'd be worth looking into. I've never really cared for the idea of Jenny Sparks as a character. It just doesn't get me, draw me, interest me at all. But I don't know. I guess maybe I hate Warren Ellis.
Yes.
Same.
That could be.
I've
not read enough Warren Ellis that I am certain that that's my opinion. But it's just like everything I have read with his, I've just been like, meh.
Yeah, I don't know if there is enough Warren Ellis to change my opinion because I've never read something from him I liked, and then he ruined the Castlevania TV show as well.
Oh, I thought everybody loved that.
No,
I hated it.
No, there's a growing contingent of people who are very okay with saying how much they hate that piece of trash.
Yeah,
I was okay with the first 4 episodes when they came out. I'm like, that's not how a Belmont acts. I've played the games.
The sound mix, the technical quality is terrible too. The sound mixing on that first season is so garbage. It's
I've not seen that. Of course, I don't have Netflix or whatever the whole business with that, right? Or whatever service put it together. I've not seen it. And I'm not a big Castlevania guy. He just never struck me. My former writing partner, Chris, we used to write everything together.
Mm-hmm.
He was a huge Castlevania guy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he had a Castlevania fan website way back in the day. That was the Castle Bathroom. That was Castlevania fan fiction that was all had a humorous bend to it. And he interviewed other fan fiction writers and a few artists who had worked on the promotional material for Castlevania or had been doing like original research on the like people that made Castlevania and all that kind of stuff. And so it was all what he did back in high school, back in the day. And so he would always talk about it, and he would very frequently be listening to Symphony of the Night, right? So I'm aware of it, but I've never seen it. But the thing I really interrupted with was not to tell a story about Chris. Although, wherever you're out there, Chris, if you see this, mazel tov, congratulations. I think I still occasionally see people reference the site out there on the internet, which is wild to me. But the thing I wanted to specifically bring up was that you're talking about the production value of Castlevania being weak, and it surprises me a little bit that there are a number of these big projects that'll come out there that get a lot of money put behind them that still have really awful production value with it, and like Twilight was one of those specifically where the make-upping was so bad in the first Twilight film. And
so what's interesting is that you're watching this show, and several of the voices you can't even hear, like Metal. I mean, you can't hear them. They're the voice mixing on.
You'll have somebody that's as loud as this, and then next to it's like you'll have somebody like this, but they're not actually whispering. And even if you're whispering and voice acting, it's supposed to be projected so the audience can still hear it anyway.
And they're mumbling. It's like whisper mumble. It's not just whisper, right? It's like whisper mumbling.
Yeah.
There's
like hey, how are you doing?
That happens in every British film.
This is something else.
This is especially bad.
And then the frustrating thing about that is like that's what ADR exists for.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was listening. My friend Darby Wilson. He has a YouTube channel called Compelled by Schlock, and he and a buddy of his watch a bunch of schlocky movies and then have like a book club about type of discussion about films. But they also have done independent films, right? They've done, horror films or mystery films or little comedy, little short bits. And they were interviewing a guy who did like an indie rom-com.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about the ADR process and how that all went through it. And Darby and his friend were like, well, of course you got to do ADR because you never get conditions right. And, and that's always a thing. And I'm sitting here like, okay, so you and I, some schmucks in the middle of nowhere understand ADR, but this company puts $500,000 or $2 or $3 million into a film, and they
don't
go
think
back
it's
and
ADR.
re-record.
It's not really. I don't think it's really ADR because it's an animated show, which means it's already.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
there is ADR in
not-
animated shows, but
It's
that's not the bulk of it. It's like when you have to go back and you realize that like the scene had to be changed, so none of the takes match up. Then you do actually have ADR in that, but it's like a very, very minuscule amount in animated and dubbing.
For the most part, it's all recording studio. That's what makes
Technically
it even more.
all dubs are ADR, but this was made English first.
I was gonna say this was made English first. Like I said, there's no excuse for it. But the thing about, to take it back to Warren Ellis, and to take it back to some of the other things that were just brought up regarding, Jenny Sparks and the rest. Ellis, and I don't know if this is just because he's a British writer trying to write American superheroes, because there's a lot of this I see in a lot of British people trying to.
You can't whisper in a comic.
I'm not talking about a comic.
Yeah, and you just make the text really tiny.
That's true.
Okay, stop distracting his point.
Sorry.
The point is that Warren Ellis and many other British writers do this really, really irritating thing of just having the characters be incredibly smug and superior and have a sort of post-ironic take to them. And it really takes away from how genuine and sincere American superheroes are. And again, that's one of the reasons why some people, like or dislike them. But you get certain British writers and they just have to make everything really smarmy. And that's kind of what you get with a lot of, I think, Warren Ellis and several other British writers trying to do.
And all of Ellis's dialogue sounds like it came from Venice Beach.
You're gonna have to explain that reference.
Like how most of his women almost sound like Valley girls, and most of his guys sound like dude bros and stuff like he doesn't really have a good grasp, I think, of getting different characterization in speech.
Or the idea that he thinks all Americans sound like they're either from Texas or
he's
LA.
like writing about people like Germanic people in Transylvania in the Castlevania case, and he's still writing the same way that he would write Americans in comics.
I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I see the Valley Girl as much, but it's definitely very post-ironic. Especially
okay. Is it? Let me put a case. Let me put a case in point that may define both of the things you're saying here. Is it more like Buffy than it is like Bram Stoker, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
It's definitely more like Buffy.
It's Buffy, but with way more F-bombs in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he loves to just fill it with profanity when
it's basically how he wrote Moon Knight, except Moon Knight gets to be ironic.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But you're not supposed to see the Belmonts is a very earnest story, right? About vampire hunters and about and the thing with their version of Dracula,
family duty and their lineage and protecting people.
And when it comes to Dracula specifically, right? The games kind of flesh this out over time, and there's a little bit of the interpersonal drama with Dracula and Alucard's mom, Lisa, I think, right? So there's a smidge of that. The bulk of the game is a very kind of Japanese Eastern mysticism take on European legends. And that's kind of what makes Castlevania interesting, because you basically have Western monsters but interpreted from a Eastern philosophy. So Dracula isn't just a vampire over the course of the series. By the time you get to I don't know, I guess Rondo of Blood, I guess, which is the Super Nintendo era. Dracula basically
the one right before Symphony.
Yeah. Dracula becomes the embodiment of like essentially man's sins. So like,
it's kind of like the embodiment of not even just sins though, right? It's like the embodiment of everything that could go wrong.
I think it's more man's sins though, because like he ends up, I think there's a little more than that as the series
it gets even further as you get through, especially once you get to the sorrows, like Dawn and Aria of Sorrow, and then you get like the reincarnation with Soma and
well, then it's just chaos and stuff. But the real sweet spot, and everyone who's played Symphony of the Night remembers this, right? And it's like, I was called here by humans, and there's these constant references of why Dracula continues to resurrect is because essentially, as long as mankind is greedy and evil and sinful, Dracula will essentially resurrect from man's sins. So he's this embodiment of the dark mirror of what humanity is. And so like that's basically the take that most,
which is why like death serves him, and why like his home is hell itself.
Right. Yeah. So you get, yeah, exactly. So like death.
Really, that's an interesting little take, especially because like Stoker used Dracula as an inversion of the Christ character.
Yeah, so
Dracula is an inversion of Christ in the series.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially instead he keeps resurrecting on his own anyway, but he also tries to have like this almost opposite of virginal rebirth by reincarnating through somebody else.
The series doesn't really, again, like this is where I would go for it's more Eastern than Western, because the series like will pepper references to Jesus, but it's very much more influenced by I would say a Japanese and Eastern way of looking at, man's sins coming back to haunt him, which is a very Japanese theme. It's
kind of a mix, though, especially when you get interviews from Igarashi, who is the guy who pretty much led everything from Symphony of the Night on to the end.
Which you'd want. I mean, you'd have saying that it's a mixed thing. Well, of course, it's going to be because they're playing. They already are playing in another person's sandbox for one, but additionally, they're it's if it's a Japanese take on this European idea, well then it's going to be a mixed thing.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
so here's the thing.
There's definitely some Shintoism perspective mixed in there for sure.
Partly because like death, as opposed to being the Grim Reaper, I believe he's essentially a Grim Reaper. But they kind of get it a little mixed up because he's the only one you see in the series. So there's some mixing, as it were. But in this Japanese tradition, a Shinigami, right, is just kind of like a spirit of death. And and so one of them is serving Dracula essentially, but he essentially becomes just the Grim Reaper as we see him. But there's some interesting interpretations with how death serves sin essentially. And so, anyway, setting all that aside, you have some very symbolic, interesting takes of like I said, a Western myth being interpreted through an Eastern lens, and that's a Castlevania in a nutshell, from I guess a literary perspective. So Warren Ellis doesn't do like any of that.
That's a long way to say.
Yeah, a long way.
Well, especially like in Castlevania, and Iga even kept this consistent. The Catholic Church can sometimes have errors or sometimes free actors that want to do their own things within it, but are widely the good guys in Castlevania.
Yeah. So the church, it's very much that because Dracula is the embodiment of man's sin, he's very much a very negative figure. He's the embodiment, he's essentially that very Japanese trope of the demon lord, demon king, whatever you want to interpret it as. Again, embodiment of evil. It's very clearly he's very, very bad. There's a slight tragic side to him, but he's just the embodiment of darkness, and with some interesting symbolism attached. So then Warren Ellis gets his hands on him, and then he just becomes I am a man of science, and the Catholic Church is against science, and so I'm the persecuted.
I hate that trope so much,
especially since the Catholic Church pretty much invented the entire scientific community.
Yeah, and we're one of the major patrons of scientific research prior to the Industrial Revolution.
So that's why I liked Van Helsing, because like all the gadgets came from the church. They were the ones experimenting and doing this stuff.
So it gets worse than that, right? Because the problem is that the show can't even like keep consistent with its own framing, essentially, because there's still freaking demons that Dracula freaking summons. He still has basically magic and, like I said, literal demons, but he's a scientist. Everything is science. And it's like, dude, you're summoning demons from hell. That's not like, it's just like, what are you doing with that? And on top of all of that, at least in the first season, and they get worse as they try to explain it later. But like, holy water is still real. In that first season, you have crap. Who is it? It's not Trevor. Who's the first?
No, Trevor is the one in that one.
Is it Trevor? Okay, so you have Trevor,
It's
and
Trevor
Trevor's
because it's Castlevania 3 is basically what it's going off of.
No, the first season's not true. The first Trevor is the second season and Symphony of the Night era. It's
No, Richter is from Symphony of the Night.
Trevor
was
right.
Castlevania 3.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So Trevor says like, "Oh, priest, can you make holy water?" And the priest is like, "Yeah, I can." And then it's like, "Wait, so we're talking about the message of the show is the church is superstitious, and that's why they persecuted Dracula, and that's why they're the real villains, and yet holy water is still real and is useful for fighting demons. Which one is it? Pick a lane." The show refuses to pick a lane, and then I think in the second season or third season or whatever, they end up trying to explain vampires.
Oh, the angles.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the reason like vampires are like
afraid of crosses.
Afraid of crosses is because they're super predators, and those like a bunch of sharp angles mess with their senses or something. It was like a really dumb.
It was the most Reddit. It was the worst Reddit take ever of explaining vampires. But Buffy doesn't do it this stupid.
So the hilarious thing about all of that was that how did we get on? Sorry.
The whole point of saying
because we got onto Warren Ellis. That's how we got on.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
just to point out how
the thing about the angles thing. There is a I can't remember. There's a YouTube, a Twitter personality account called Darwin to Faith or whatever, and it's a guy who just does apologetics type posts on Twitter, and he's constantly arguing with a couple of the Twitter atheists about like these ideas, and but it sounds exactly like the kind of thing that he would post and have a debunking comment.
It was stolen from another movie where vampires were ancient super predators. Like they didn't even come up with it themselves.
Oh, that's such a silly idea. I can't.
What's so
ironic
doesn't make sense
about this because like
Ellis is a hack, and I really have a hard time accepting any other explanation for Ellis as a creator.
Well, what's so ironic about this here is that I've seen enough anime that, like in the East, it seems they're far more likely to do this, where they will somehow they like to combine science and the supernatural together in one thing. Sonic, for instance, does this all the time. They're always, Robotnik will be using some kind of machine to somehow summon a demon from, the middle of the earth or something. And the irony here is that this is an anime, yet they get a Westerner and a white guy to write it, and then this is what we end up with.
What it really ends up with is there's like it's a video game series for youngsters that just gets made for our modern R-rated sensibilities. You get a scene with Alucard and Trevor just like exchanging F words at each other. That's like
and then they have like a bromance after that.
That's the show. The show is just like F you, no F you, no F you, and I'm just like, what am I watching? And then at the very end, Death just starts piling on a bunch of FUs, and it's like, seriously, like, what is this? This is a video game series. I played as a kid. I played Simon's Quest, and then it's like,
it's just a Friday night out bowling with Rhys. What's up with that?
It's like there's this great game series called Devil May Cry. And the main character, Dante, says a bunch of puns. He's a funny guy, right? Then they made a spin-off series by another studio called DMC Devil May Cry. When I say series, they only got the one game. And there's this one spot where he's fighting a succubus, And it's funny because it just doesn't feel like it fits in. It's like shock, but they're just throwing F-bombs back and forth at each other. It's like, this doesn't feel like Dante at all. Dante would have come up with some goofy, witty pun to yell at the enemy instead.
So
it's like that.
So it's
type
basically Conker's Bad Fur Day upgraded.
Reloaded. Yeah.
I don't even think Conker was this.
No, he wasn't.
No, but
Conker
the
was
fact
just-
that the
Conker is
original
just
was all
put-
like nice and cute
Yeah.
and innocent,
Oh, I
and then
see
they
what you
just
mean, yeah.
And then
right,
Reloaded, they didn't have to play that, so they made it dirtier than it was.
right.
See, Conker is more just like toilet humor though, and this is literally just
Yeah.
yeah, and Castlevania just is
True.
it's just trying to be edgy with F words.
This
And
is something that I
very Warren
see
Ellis.
a
It's really
lot more
concerted.
recently, though. A lot of, like in cartoons, for instance, there will be some show that people loved from way back when, and it's nostalgic, and then they bring it back for a final season or two. And now, just because those kids are adult, they figure, oh, we have to up the adultness and make this some, super high mature show, and then they completely ruin it as a result.
Yeah. Okay. So that is actually a really interesting thing. I want to lay something. I agree with that impulse, and I have a big problem with the impulse of over adulting things to the fact where they can't be appreciated by others. I think that's a thing, but that actually brings up a comment that I laid out on Twitter earlier this week, and I kind of want people's opinion on it. Right? Somebody was commenting on that exact thing where people over dark material.
Mm-hmm.
And comics, it doesn't. I mean, they try to make every comic have a serious dark origin, and like you reflect specifically back on the Flash, and how they had to give Flash the my parents the parental death backstory. Was accused of the crime, the whole business, right? I got to clear my dad motivation. Barry can't just be a cop because Barry wants to be a cop. He's got to have a tragic reason for it, right?
Right.
And so somebody was talking about things like that, and yes, and they said yes, dark can work for Batman, but not every character is Batman, right? And my rejoinder was, what if I told you that the constant push toward dark doesn't work for Batman either?
That was an interesting take. That was an interesting.
And I'm not, and I really think this is the case, right? So, like, if you get to like specifically, here's a specific story that I think that pinpoints the idea. It's The Lonely Place of Dying. Have you guys read that one?
No.
No.
Okay, so A Lonely Place of Dying was written by Marv Wolfman. It is the in-story introduction of Tim Drake, right? Tim Drake's first appearance is in Batman Year 3, the event that just precedes A Lonely Place of Dying. And A Lonely Place of Dying was a crossover that happened. Part 1 was in Tech, I think it was. Part 2 and 4 were in Teen Titans, and parts 3 and 5, I think, were in Batman, right? And so it went over across multiple issues, and it was the story. And the premise of the story was that Batman, since Jason Todd's death, he never dealt with Todd's death, and so he's emotionally upset and he's losing control of himself. And Tim has watched this happen. He's just a civvy out there in the world. He's a kid who's really smart, who figured out Batman and Robin's secret identities, and he's been keeping it to himself this whole time.
Did this
sees...
happen before what's it called, the Under the Red Hood?
Yeah, this is 1989. Yeah. And so he figured it out who Batman and Robin were, and then he saw that there was another Robin that acted and moved different, and he's like, okay, well, who knows what that's all about. And then he notices that guy stops showing up, and that Batman gets super violent. And so he's seeing all these news reports of Batman being super violent. And this is before Zero Hour and before the idea that Batman was an urban legend, right? So, that thing. So Batman was in the news, people could see him. And so Tim had figured all this stuff out because he's got this keen analytic mind. And so he figures out the difference is that when there's a Robin, when Batman has somebody else to care about, then Batman doesn't let himself give into rage or give into obsession because he's being the responsible adult, but he has to have a reason to be the responsible adult. So the second part of the story is Tim is looking for Dick. And so
I thought that's what you were gonna say.
Right.
So that's how that happened.
Tim goes looking for Dick, and Dick is on hiatus from the Teen Titans and went back to the circus he grew up in. And then there's a whole murder mystery at the circus. And then he comes to Dick and he says, "You need to be Robin again." And Dick's like, "Well, that's stupid. I'm going to go talk to Bruce." Right. and so that's how that whole story shakes out. And it's super fun and introduces Tim and made Tim to be a real awesome thing. But the thing is so Batman, I mean, Tim is proven right? That's part of the deal. And so then you have the next year and a half of the stories in the canon or Tim being trained to be the new Robin, right? And that's how that led in there.
Oh, that all happened before. You're right. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So and so that this was it may have been it was 89. That One Place was 89.
Right, because I remember that the Robin series I think was 90 exactly.
Yeah. And so that's that's all that's going on there. But the thing the story demonstrated is the danger of the darkness, and it had Tim. It had moments with Tim, moments with Alfred, and moments with Dick where they're all reflecting on, Batman used to be happier, and it was better when Batman could be happy. When even with the criminals never saw Batman smile, when his friends and acquaintances saw Batman smile, that the world was better when Batman can smile, right? And that became like that meme, right, was present in the Denny O'Neil books moving forward, where Batman seldom smiled, but he would every once and again. Maybe once every other issue, you'd see Batman really enjoying a conversation he had with Commissioner Gordon, or really enjoying the time, something with Tim or Robin, or Harold the Mute showed up again shortly after that, and so there were these supporting casts where Batman could relax and just be a human being, and he wasn't just like a justice machine. And Denny would write about it in the bullpen, this need to balance the dark and the light, because he needs, you want the seriousness of the story, you want the batness of Batman, right? But if you don't have, the man, if you don't have the night behind the dark night, then you're missing an important part of the component that makes it fun to read.
Yeah. Well, I think Batman is ultimately an optimist, or else he wouldn't be doing what he's doing.
I don't know how far I would, out of the original Golden, again, I always keep going back to the Golden Age. I understand that's not always the version of the characters to go with, but I will say that out of the characters that we get in that initial surge of superhero characters, Batman being essentially a almost carbon copy of the Shadow, he is meant to be the darker one by comparison with Wonder Woman
sure.
and Superman. That doesn't. I think again the real question there is when we say dark. How dark are we going? Because one thing that, as I'm reading, for example, Absolute Super Batman and Matt Reeves' take with I watched the Penguin series recently. It really
good because I really hated the movie.
I actually liked the movie, but I don't.
Well, not to get sidetracked on that. I was just really.
Yeah. It's rough. It's interesting.
I've noticed often those movies really can change stuff up.
Okay, I'm going to answer that question, but before I do, I want to answer a thing in chat that's funny. So Jim Tuner brought up this thing about vampires and politicians and Abraham Lincoln, a vampire hunter, and I want to address that real fast. I saw Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, right? And it's not a particularly good movie, but it's action schlock. And at the very end of it, though, there's a really funny part. I think Jim will get a laugh out of this. Maybe our audience will too. So the point at the end of the movie is that I think Abraham Lincoln becomes a part of this fraternity of vampire hunters that are tied to the presidency, who know the secret that vampires walk among us. And so it's like the idea is that every new president is going to hand off to the next president that secret, and then also, essentially you're part of fighting the vampire menace too now because you've become president. And the way that
canonically that means now Trump would be the vampire
you messed it up for me. All right, yes, okay. So the funny thing is that the actual end of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is a flash forward to then the current day, which was I think it's just like I think you see just like over the shoulder like a hand. But it's Obama. So Obama got and it's Obama's now the vampire hunter. He's become the new hero. And what's really funny, of course, is what Metal just said, which is the implication now that according to the rules of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, guess who has been a
twice.
Yeah, exactly.
Twice.
I think it's even funnier trying to imagine Joe Biden doing it, though.
Right, exactly.
I think like Joe obviously was suffering before his election, but he's. I mean, if you look at a picture of him in January of 21 to now, that man's been food for.
He lost eventually.
He's been slowly drained.
The vampires got him.
Although something suddenly happened, you noticed as soon as Trump won, suddenly gets this spring in his step. So is it possible that perhaps he actually is a vampire and he was being deprived of blood for a while?
No.
Well, it went that bump went away.
Yeah. Trump saved her from the vampires by getting anyway. So it's just funny to me because that whole like idea that they tried to imply with like, oh, now Obama is our superhero is like, well, you realize now by that very same logic, so is you know who. So that cracked me up. When it comes to the Penguin, I will very briefly, without getting into it, say that I did enjoy Matt Reeves' Batman film, but I didn't expect I would. And the more I think about the film as a movie, the more it tends to come apart. So I'm acknowledging that it's very flawed. That being said, the performances I think are very strong in that film. And so I just ended up getting invested in people portraying other fictional people. And so if you enjoyed that aspect of it, because I got to the end of it and I was like, okay, this character who's ostensibly playing Selena, by the end of the film, it's just a girl in a wig with a gun. This is just she's just a woman with a gun. It's not Catwoman, but I did like the woman just as a woman, and she had some tender moments with Robert Pattinson, and I enjoyed Robert Pattinson's acting, and so it's more of a testament to the strength, I think, of actors doing their craft. And if you enjoyed that, then you will also enjoy the Penguin, because the Penguin parks its car entirely on the performances, which are very, very, very good. So just the craft of acting, it's good from that perspective. When it comes to it being a piece of superhero media, it's so far removed from superhero media. It was basically just The Sopranos with really, really good acting. And
well, now wait a minute. Wasn't that the entire Dark Knight series?
No. The Dark Knight series was actually
minus the first one.
No, I actually think that series was much more fanciful. This series, Matt Reeves is trying to do something different. He's trying to be like, no, I can be even more realistic and not super heroic, except for the one aspirational moment at the very end, which was again well acted. So to answer your question, Rhys, is that it's a testament to the craft of acting.
See, because I really hated all of the acting in the Batman. I thought it seemed every single moment in that movie was a torture. I could see
why people could see that. Pattinson's
I don't want to watch a movie about a bored emo kid. If I did, it would need to be funny.
So you didn't like Patterson in Batman, and you didn't like Twilight. So
no, Twilight's garbage. Everything about Twilight.
To be fair, Twilight was done so poorly that even good actors acted poorly in Twilight.
Yeah,
I don't think Patterson is like talks very strongly about that film himself.
No, he actually, it was one of the things like he he was so disappointed with the first Twilight film that he tried to get out of his contract. He was not familiar with the property before it went in there. Apparently, it was something his agent sold him on because the books were so popular. And he was so upset with the way the first movie went that he tried to get out of the contract. And then when he couldn't. He was just like, "Well, a job's a job," and he showed up.
Phoned it in for the rest of it.
Just phoned it in, yeah. So.
I don't think he's a bad actor. Honestly,
I think I liked his version of a younger Batman, and the character arc of that film of a man who is consumed by vengeance, having to question that quest and then realize he needs to become more aspirational. That I'm not saying the film delivers as well on that premise as it should, because it doesn't, mostly because of how it's, I think, plotted. But the idea, I was able to see the idea of what they're going for. And Pattinson does a really good job of selling at the end. He's just holding that woman's arm and he's like, okay, I'm not just saving this woman. I need to inspire. It's all done kind of wordlessly. It's just a guy glancing in a costume. And I was like, this is really good. This is very good superhero media. It doesn't make up for all the mistakes the film makes, but I liked that. And I feel like there was some potential.
Movie, but I got to see the ending, and I did feel that same way. I was like, wow, this is an interesting take on Batman I've never seen.
Yeah, I mean, let's be, I'm going to be completely honest. There's a chance that I might have missed that scene because I had already checked out of the movie.
Well,
because it was like before then.
I was just about to compare it to
the setup
Twilight,
the setup at the end,
Twilight,
or like the whole mystery plot was terrible. The Riddler was unappealing and stupid looking. The MacGuffin for to solve the mystery was like so like it was just, the whole thing was just dumb. It was dumb.
It was not. That's where you can see the difference between how Nolan plots a film, because Nolan knows how to make everything. He's like, I'm not saying I'm not trying to like worship the guy either. I'm not saying his films are perfect, but Nolan does a good job of assembling the structure of his films, kind of like the pieces. I set this piece up. Batman Begins is a good example of this. Hey, here's Wayne Tower. It's the center of all the utilities, including the water. Here we do weapons. Hey, there's this weapon that vaporizes water. It disappears. I wonder what that could be. And then, oh no, the weapon that vaporizes water has been mixed with a poison, and it's headed for Wayne Tower, which will spread that poison through water vapor across the whole city. You see the pieces they set them up over time, over the course of the film. You're kind of they're dropped in at certain points, and then when it adds up, like many good kind of mystery stories, you can kind of figure it out a couple seconds or a minute before the film tells you what happens, and you don't feel like it's like a cheap, dirty shot. Right. What Matt Reeves' show does, there's some really interesting pieces that he's assembled, but it's a complete rug pull, and I say that like deliberately. Because that's what he has to do, is he has to pull a rug at the end. But there's no way for you to have figured that out.
Oh no, except that there is, right? Like, here's the thing about it. Okay. So there were several moments in the movie that totally took me out of it. One is when it was toward the middle of the movie when they were dusting paper for fingerprints. Because that's not how that works. You do not dust paper for fingerprints. you have to use a cyanoacrylate tent to get fingerprints off of paper. So that was just like, Hardy Boys, How to Be a Detective book that I read like when I was 10. It's like,
right, but that's a detail. I'm not saying that.
But I'm just saying like that kind of detail, that stupid kind of detail, demonstrates to me that the screenwriter doesn't actually know or care to know anything about the thing he's writing about, because it was supposed to be a real detective story. The other thing is that the clue to piece it all together, like if you've ever worked on a house, you know what that is, and the idea that Batman is here holding this carpet stretcher. Spoiler alert. And and just like, I don't know what this is. I'll never be able to figure out what this is. It's just crazy that I don't know what this is.
But the film doesn't do see, like, the way you would do that is that you would need to your cinematographer. So maybe like it's less the screenwriter's fault and more of like the directors. The way that you set that up is you show throughout the film, or even in the scene preceding, you highlight the rug so that the audience can see the rug and be like, why am I being shown this rug? So that later when he puts the pieces together, the film does not do a good job signaling that, like, oh, there's something underneath a floor somewhere. And
Well,
so
the
just
whole
so
thing
happens
like,
to be it's just not, it's not
Chekhov's gun.
but
what
it
I'm
doesn't
saying is from an investigator's perspective, you're gonna have a carpet stretcher. It's gonna have the part number on it. It's gonna have the manufacturer's name on it. You're gonna run that, you're gonna do a Google search, and in 3 minutes you're gonna know how to buy one in your neighborhood. So then you're like,
in other words, Batman's not a good detective.
Yeah, he's not a good detective, and that's the whole thing. The whole thing was like, Batman's a great detective, and he's the worst detective.
I'm a little. I don't think
Bill Murray in The Man Who Knew Too Little was a better detective than Batman in The Batman.
I think that's being a little harsh, but I will say that the film does not signal to the audience, because that's the important thing. It's less about, in my opinion, it's more about the audience experience there, and the audience just literally just gets tossed into what the final revelation is going to be, and it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like, oh, I've been figuring this out along with you. It just kind of feels incidental and tacked on. Because I think because it kind of is.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
The stuff that actually resonates pretty well is the connection with families and stuff. So like the Falcones, with the Waynes, with Selina, that web of intrigue, and it's in the sort of noir take they're doing. That stuff tracks a lot better. But they wanted to have like a big finale, and that's really where
I wanted everyone to lose. I didn't feel any attachment to anybody. I said, if you just pull a chain and flush this entire, everybody just floated into the sea, that'd probably be a better, faster movie. Can the Riddler's plan happen in the first act? Can we do that?
Okay. Anyway, like I said, I
watch horror movies.
I walked in with very low expectations. I enjoyed the film, and I was even surprised to like find myself enjoying it. I did not expect to. I actually kind of expected I would hate it, and I was like surprisingly compelled by it, and I was trying to figure out why that was. And the more I watch The Penguin, the more I think it's because the acting is very compelling, even if it's not the version of the characters I want to see. I don't want to see that version of Selina particularly, but when she's holding Bruce at the very end and she's being very tender, it was like, oh wow, here's like a female being showing genuine tenderness to Batman, and so often Batman doesn't get that reward. And it's like, I don't know, I kind of liked it. A woman who's just holding a man going, it's okay, it's okay. It's, I think that's what she just says. She's like, it's okay, it's okay. And it's like, wow, it's that meme where they're like, men want one thing, and it's the simplest thing ever. It's just for their loved one to just hold them and tell them that, you did a good job. Sure. And like it does the meme. So I liked that.
Yeah.
I liked Pattinson. Like I said, I liked Pattinson, and surprisingly, and this is the reason why they made a Penguin show. Obviously, Penguin does a little bit of scene stealing with his wild Penguin performance that's so over the top that it's believable. I watched 8 hours. I didn't expect that he could hold it together for 8 hours, and Colin Farrell is also a very, very good actor. You kind of forget that he's in a fat suit and he's wearing prosthetics. You just think he's just this big, gross-looking penguin guy.
Really? And they can't get Jim Carrey to...
It's weird. That's all I can say.
It's not weird. It's not weird. It's who Jim Carrey is versus who Colin Farrell is. Colin Farrell, I mean, for the fact that, never mind the fact that I found every single element of that movie completely uncompelling and all of the performances to be lackluster, Colin Farrell did not phone in his performance. I just thought they gave him horrible, stupid things to do and say that nobody could possibly believe were conceive of. Like, yeah, the entire thing is just those are things that like 13-year-olds imagine happen. It's like, yeah, and not in a I couldn't. I hated that.
My big criticism of the entire my big criticism of the entire project is more an existential one, which is, what are we doing with our superheroes now, and supervillains as well? And this brings it back to Warren Ellis and Castlevania we were talking about earlier, which is, and I'm not saying everything with Batman needs to be like for 8-year-olds. There's a sweet spot where you can make something, you can target something mature without being dragging into the mud and being super vulgar. But Batman is a character that people of all ages do like. Your kids love him. Your older relatives love him. Everyone loves Batman. He's one of the most popular superheroes like on record. That's just the market demonstrates that fact.
Yep.
So what's the point of making over 10 hours? Because if you count 8 hours essentially of Penguin with the over 2.5 hours of Matt Reeves' Batman, it's 10 hours of content where you have lots of profanity, F words, you have references to prostitution, to OnlyFans, to just like, gross vulgarity, drug usage of the most vile kind. And you get to a point with this content where you're just like, what am I doing? What are we doing with, what am I doing here? Why am I listening to, essentially just, it's this HBO Sopranos style content, but it's got like, characters that are meant to be not for kids, but safe for young adults.
Right.
It's supposed to be safer content than this. And they're like, no, we have to do realism, but a type of realism that is just very, very vulgar and dirty.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and it's one of these things, like, I love Tarantino, right? But not every project needs to be a Tarantino project.
Correct.
And it's actually really funny that we're talking about this part of it today, because yes, for some reason, I can't remember what it was. I was looking for something back in the archives of Twitter, and I ran across a post that Doug Ernst had put up of a time that we all had a show, and we were talking about comic books, and clearly about saving the comic industry. And you were there, Twitless, and I was, and whoever else. But anyway, I went back to to listen to part of that show, and we actually were talking about this very thing in that show. So it's really funny to just kind of work its way around that. But this idea that you can have material that's good for kids and good for adults, right? It can have the complexity and the heavy thematics of a murder mystery without having the profanity, without having the sexuality, without having gore, exactly, because you can have violence, not have gore. And it reminded me in between that and this, what you're talking about, it reminded me of how popular and how instantly popular the Batman the Animated Series was.
Right. No, I've been doing a rewatch of that. So I want to tweak on that a little bit if I can, or add, which is, and I don't think that this is disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just a personal take I have on that argument. I get a little frustrated when it's like, oh, it's got lots of vulgarity and F-bombs in it. That's adult content. And I'm like, I'm an adult. I don't want a bunch of that.
I agree there.
Right. It's a misunderstanding what the word adult even means.
Yeah. So it's just like,
but at the same time,
you can have content. You can have content that's not for children. That's also not exceedingly vulgar and disgusting.
Yep.
There's
and a great example of that would be the Lord of the Rings films, right? Like the amount of violence in those movies. There's not a lot of gore in those movies. There is some, but the violence is completely off the chart, right? It's absolutely a hard PG-13 level of violence in those pictures. But I do not have a problem showing my kids that kind of violence. They were watching Lord of the Rings when they were, like 10, because like that's not. But like, I wouldn't want to show Batman 89 to my 10-year-old because of the sexual content in it, right? And it's all implied, but it's still a little bit much for a 10-year-old. You know what I mean? And so I think that like I'm 100% on board with you that there are aspects that like they're still targeted, they're still adult kind of things, but they don't necessarily have to be profane to still be enjoyable.
Yeah.
And on the other side, the very opposite end too, like I'm sick of every animated movie being referred to as a kid's film, right? It's like, oh, heaven forbid the rest of us just enjoy a good movie and it be a good movie that doesn't have to have all this other stuff thrown in there to be a so-called adult movie, right?
Well, I mean, I think anime kind of broke that conversation's kind of been unpacked. Anime,
well, I mean, it has with Eastern media. You still don't see a lot of Western cartoons that are just made for adults.
No, that's that. That's.
Well, I mean, and I think part of that is because the first few examples of that, they really went hard into your Bashki, several of the Bashki projects. They went hard into the pushing the boundaries of what animation can be in the adult thing. So you get like. So, forgetting names of things right now, but anyway, there were several of those first animated films for adults in the 70s and 80s. Fritz the Cat was one where they really were like push the border because we're going to do this for the X or for the NC-17 rating, and that's the intention of this film. And those were some of the first animated cartoons that were targeted at adults. I mean, that were like full feature length, I should say, right?
Sure.
Because obviously there were shorts and stuff back in the day that were, but yeah, I definitely. So I think while anime has definitely been there to demonstrate the possibility of it, we still don't see that being harnessed by the Hollywood, with the exception of some CG pictures that are like what's that one that I hate? Avatar. James Cameron's Avatar.
Yeah,
that's essentially an animated film.
I mean, if you want to go with that, if you want to go down that road,
cartoon.
The amount of computer animation and just normal Hollywood shots makes them all animated films at this point.
And here's the thing. The 90s came along, and all of a sudden, this little thing called Pixar popped up. And for like a decade, suddenly, it was okay for adults and kids alike to watch G-rated movies. Right? Like nowadays, you can't even make a so-called kids movie without sneaking that one or two little jokes in there designed to go over kids' heads but be picked up by the censors to make sure we get that PG rated rating, because if we don't, nobody's even going to come see our movie.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Heaven forbid we just make a good film.
I cannot argue with that point. Okay, let's take a look at some of the things from the chat. One of the things is Jim said much ago that the deranged Batman is okay sometimes, and we have had like 35 years of it being done over and over. I agree 100%. We have way too many of those stories, and that's like whole runs that are all just that. The great thing about Batman is that he can be done in about 7 different ways as a character, and I would also agree with that.
Wait a minute, I thought there were 3 Batmans.
Yeah. Fizz points out that you can that DC does technically have darker anti-heroes such as Wild Dog and Hitman, but chooses not to use them. Although Hitman's technically dead, but still. And I would agree that's true. There are already ways around that without having to make Batman I'm chasing the guy without a face character. You can have
That's
that.
true. You'll note that Marvel kind of has this separation between like the hardcore characters and then everybody else, where DC, it's almost like they try to mix the two together at any one point.
And I think there are some characters you can do that really well with, but there's some that you just don't. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Since we're talking about Batman the Animated Series, I wanted to mention that this is something I think becomes into stark relief when you watch the entire run like in one go. or becomes easier to see, as opposed to when you're a kid and you're just kind of watching the episodes once a week and maybe watching them out of order and stuff. When you watch the whole thing, like from start to finish in like its release order, obviously it's still a very good show, and I'm not gonna I still believe that very strongly, but there's something about the DCAU that I do not like as a whole, and it's the meta arc, the complete story arc for, in fact, Batman himself. And there's a story told in Kevin Conroy's voice, and only his voice, actually, which is very fascinating. And it's the idea that essentially, as the show and the history of the DCAU progresses, Bruce basically dies as a character and only Batman remains. So early on, when you're watching the earlier seasons, Kevin Conroy has like two voices. He has this higher pitched, kind of up like an octave or two, and it's
the Playboy voice.
Not that much.
It's this, hey, it's my Bruce Wayne voice.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that voice is that it's initially you think, oh, that's just him, he's pretending to be Bruce. But it's very telling, because in the scenes where he's talking to Dick Grayson and he's being real with Dick, he has the Bruce Wayne voice, which tells you that that's also a real part of him. So that's a very important signal for who Bruce is and who he might be able to become, because over time, and this ties in with what you were saying earlier about Batman having the possibility of being and finding happiness.
Right.
They tease this with his relationship with Selina as well. He has, again, that more genuine Bruce voice and has these, moments of entertaining the idea of love. And then obviously when Dick comes in, it's that kind of fatherly finding family again. But as the show progresses and as the DCAU progresses, I'm not even saying this is all deliberate, but it is a compounding effect.
Yeah.
He loses the Bruce Wayne voice, and he eventually only really has that by the end of season 4, when they do the kind of the revamp. He only has the Batman voice, whether he's in Bruce Wayne's, suit or he's in the Bat suit. Now, by the time he gets to the DC animated universe, that compounds, and it ends up, because the DCAU does not end with Justice League Unlimited.
It ends with Batman Beyond.
The Ant-Man Beyond. And Batman Beyond is a story of a broken, sad man who never got his happiness and only gets to have a teeny... eke out a teeny bit of it in the last episode of it's actually the last episode of the DC animated universe.
Bring it up here. I know exactly.
Which is the end cap for Batman Beyond, and then you just it's a very, when you put it all together, okay, and you don't get this if you're just watching individual episodes, because there's individual episodes that are positive, but the picture that comes across when you put it all together is that Bruce Timm's Batman is actually a very tragic and sad character who never gets those promises. His relationship with Dick falls apart by season 4, and by Batman Beyond, his relationship with Barbara and everyone else has completely decayed. And so he's just bitter and alone and has nothing and no one. And it's just like, thanks, Bruce Timm, for that. Yeah.
People miss one of the earlier setups for that too, and that's in the '93 Mask of the Phantasm, where he goes through this whole crisis. It's a great movie, but there's like the whole part where he's like crying at his parents' graves, like, why am I not allowed to be happy? It's like part of the setup for all of that stuff later on.
It's just
true.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, this all starts with Miller,
sorry.
right?
No, not really. Because Miller set up the grief as a motive, but it wasn't necessarily the end all of things.
Frank Miller's Batman is extremely happy by the end of Dark Knight Returns, almost psychotically so.
He's just happy to be beating people up.
Well, and I guess what I want to say is I want to separate the Frank Miller's Batman and Batman Return. I mean, in year 1 from Batman and Dark Knight Returns, right? Because those aren't necessarily completely analogous. And because that's one of the things that like I really get the feeling I need to go back and reread it. But from year one, it's the idea of being born in tragedy versus being sentenced to tragedy, right? That there's hope in the quest. There's hope for peace. And one of the things that I always felt growing up reading Batman was like it was born in tragedy, but his mission is one of hope, right? It's that if he can prevent other tragedies, then he's doing
the show nods to that, but like I said, it's the story that's not told to you outright, but is told.
Yeah, no. I think your reading of the series is a whole. My reflection on looking at Miller in terms of those themes is when you look at where Denny directed the character to be, through year one, through year two, through year three, through Lonely Place of Dying, into the reintroduction of Tim Drake, and how that was impacting Batman, Bruce through Tim, through his reunification with Dick, right? You see a Batman moving toward a place where of happiness, right, of peace with himself, and that was interrupted throughout with the earthquake, with Contagion, with those sort of things, but it wasn't undone until just before Denny left the title. Because there's a lot of those things that were plot elements. They weren't necessarily like character points for Bruce. They were plot elements that he was walking through.
It's just interesting because, like I said, it's a very good. The animated series is very, very good. It's the gold standard for Batman storytelling for a lot of people. And there's a good reason for it. It's just interesting when you take the whole DCAU as a whole, the meta narrative being told is one I don't particularly like for Bruce. It's really,
and I agree too. Like
really
one of the parts I always hated was there's an episode in Batman Beyond where Bruce is kind of like being gaslit through a voice in his head that he's going insane. And at the very end, Terry's just like, how did you know you weren't actually going insane? And he's like, because the voice in my head doesn't call me Bruce. He's like, you're not that guy anymore. Tell that to my mind.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be in a very small group here as someone who does not mind the Bruce is dead version of Batman, for three reasons. One, Batman Beyond is my favorite of the different shows. Two, because as much as I hate Batman's no kill rule, if you're gonna do it, the only way it makes sense to me is that Batman would have this fear of himself that he knows if he ever crossed that line, he would never be, he would be unstoppable. And the only thing that keeps that nightmare away is that he sticks to this. And three, one of the things I love, and you brought this up earlier with Tim saying he has to have his Robin, is that one of the things I love about my favorite character in all of superhero comics, which is Dick Grayson, is that he is basically one of two people on Earth who can keep Batman from going off the deep end when he's about to. So.
I don't know if it's I don't know if I don't know if I'm gonna chalk it up to two. Like I said, I
think there's more than two.
The other being Alfred.
I think Selina's done it a few times.
And Tim
like it
as well. Does. I mean, like that was the entire dynamic between, and this is when the DC universe really died. Like in many ways, 100% fully died.
Oh, are you going to talk about the wedding?
No, it was already. It'd been dead. It'd been dead decades before that.
Long before that.
Long before that. So
fair enough.
in the Identity Crisis story arc, where Dr. Light and Jean Loring, a combination of them, kills Ralph and Sue Dibney, and it's this whole big murder mystery. Spoilers, by the way. And Tim Drake's father is killed by Captain Boomerang.
Oh yeah.
And Tim takes on this Dark Avenger role, and in the wake of all of this, also Connor Kent is killed, and so Tim's best friend is killed, and his dad is killed, and he becomes the Red Robin. He gets the big dark costume. He's trying to resurrect. Well, I guess I'm condensing things a little bit in that there. because he gets the black cape costume from Tim Drake from the animated series first, because they gave Tim's costume to Dick in the animated series. But yeah, he puts on the black because he's mourning Connor, and then he's the whole thing. And Tim, the whole purpose of Tim Drake was to give Bruce the sense of balance. It was to reflect this kind of idea, this hope for the future, this idea that being a crime fighter, even being in the Batman circle, you don't necessarily have, you're not necessarily bound by your rite of passage, right? The idea that Tim's father was alive and he was maintaining his relationship with his dad and all this kind of stuff that was in there. And it was fresh to the mythos, and it was welcomed. And they just cast that aside in this super permanent way. And it was like, well, the ride's over, guys. The show's done. Call for the curtain. It's over with.
And that's just harkening back to this whole thing of you can go too dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was my real take on that. Okay, from the chat, because I there's a couple of things I want to hit on. Jim said, Dave had said earlier that there were people who preferred 66 Batman and hated the 89 movie. This is absolutely true. And Jim had a follow-up comment that I thought was really fun to highlight my favorite recent Batman films are the last two animated films with Adam West, in particular the final one with Shatner as Two-Face. That was a really fun. Yeah.
I had heard they were
Bill
friends.
Shatner voices Two-Face in it, and it's adapted from a 2-part episode that was written for the TV, and it was determined to be too graphic, and so it was cut, and parts of it were rewritten as the False Face episode, but they did a comic book of that was directly from nearly directly from the screenplay, and then it was that was back in 12, I want to say, and then they did those two in continuity specials, and one of them was once again taken from that original screenplay.
Interesting.
So yeah, and they had Shatner as voicing Harvey Dent, Two-Face.
And I could
that one
see
was just called Batman versus Two-Face.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I could see.
I was gonna have to look on the shelf to double check that.
A problem for the old show.
Yeah, I
it was
can't remember
the
exactly.
sequel to Return of the Caped Crusaders.
Yeah, there we go. So then Abigail had asked, was the emo Bruce Wayne due to acting or writing? I believe it was due to acting. What's his name?
Pattinson
was interviewed about a year before the film came out, and was asked about what kind of prep he was doing for the movie, and he's like, "Oh, nothing really, just laying around the house."
Yeah, he refused to work out to play Batman.
He refused to work out to play Batman. He wasn't reading any comics, wasn't studying the character. He was just gonna smoke cigarettes and show up on set, and screw that guy. So, what are we looking at here?
I was just wondering if he ever sparkled in the movie.
The Batman Lego movie. That's something. Okay.
I mean, the fact that I don't mind saying the Lego Batman movie is my favorite Batman movie.
It was definitely something. I'll say that.
I think I only like it because it makes fun of all the complaints I've had with modern Batman.
Yeah, it does.
There are lots of things I like about the movie, but the thing I dislike about the movie, I felt was such a missed opportunity, was the entire plot of the Lego Batman movie is Batman learning to depend on his family, depend on the supporting cast, and not just be such a whiny band baby. And I thought that was a fun little take on the idea. But what it misses out on is, on no point in the film does Batman ever, after having isolated all the people in his life, does he never look to the camera and say, "I've made a huge mistake"?
That's funny.
I don't get that joke. What is that?
It's Arrested
He was-
Development. It's Will
Oh,
Arnett.
Yeah, Will Arnett was the
he's-
voice of
Will
Batman.
Arnett voiced was
Okay.
Job on Arrested Development, and that's like the line in that show. So
Gotcha.
He's got a couple of them.
yeah, well, yeah,
That's one of the big ones. Yeah.
several characters in Arrested Development use the "I made the huge mistake" line.
Yeah, you're right.
And that would have been. In fact, I actually have a meme I made as my wallpaper for years. That was the Lego Batman, and it said I made a huge mistake.
So, yeah, I like Lego Batman. I disagree with people who say it's the best Batman film, partly because like I never understood the arc they try to force with because there's two arcs, right? Batman's supposed to learn to depend more on his Bat family. That arc works very well.
Yep.
There's this secondary arc they try to push, which doesn't work at all. And I
Is it the
so
Barbara Gordon
disagree. It's a hilarious joke.
Oh, because I
And
dislike
I
that
love
one
stuff
too.
like that.
It's the one where it's like, oh, Batman also needs to apologize to Joker for some reason because
That's stupid.
he hasn't been appreciating him, and it's like I don't.
Yeah.
It's something that only works in Lego Batman where it is a joke.
It's
Where
still
this is the
stupid.
Lego universe.
I still hate it.
Yeah, it was dumb because it's just like Joker is only less villainous in Lego Batman because he's not murderous.
Because there's no stakes. Because
There's no threat of death. There's only the threat of destruction.
Which you can rebuild. We can always rebuild it afterwards.
You can always rebuild because it's a Legos. It's Legos. That's the point.
So to me, it's always like you already had a character arc with like the main story. Why do you have to add this tack on this second one? That's the thing I didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt forced. It was like, okay, you already have this thing with him and Barbara and Bruce, and okay, I get it. And it's like, no, but he also needs to like patch up his relationship with the Joker. And I'm like, the fudge? What?
Why?
That one.
Well, I mean, yeah. So, Fizz had said much earlier that he didn't bother seeing the Matt Reeves Batman as it was redundant because the Nolan films already had stripped away the iconic elements of the Batman mythos to be realistic.
He just got.
I sort of agree with that, except that
I mostly agree with that.
I don't think that's even the issue, honestly. Like the idea of a tactical Batman isn't exclusive and can definitely fit in it. I think the issue was that like I felt the Matt Reeves picture, and this once again, Twitless and I are going to totally disagree on this. I felt he was even less realistic than
that's interesting. That's an interesting tension.
That is very interesting.
I mentioned that there's this attempt at it's less. I guess maybe I should use the term verisimilitude. It's a type of realism, right? And it's this going for this it's honestly, I'd say it's a vulgar realism is what it's trying to hit. Now, I will say this. It's not completely redundant from the Nolan films. I'm not saying that it succeeds at the things that it's attempting to do. So like that is something I can concede. However, I will say that if you want a Batman film that is attempting to go what I would say neo-noir with it, as opposed to, because like Nolan's film was tactical, right? There's not really that much noir in it. And Nolan's not trying to be noir with it. And those films succeed. And one of the things about Batman that's so cool is that Batman is a character who can, I've said it this way with both Batman and Joker. There's a Batman and Joker for all seasons, and they're all 100% the character. Lego Batman is 100% the like young person's toy Batman, and Adam West is totally the kitschy 60s Batman, and the 1989 version is they all work. And Matt Reeves' version is for people who want a more noir, neo-noir, I'd say, because it's not like old school noir. And so if you're interested in that neo-noir take on Batman, I think there is something in that film for you, despite the flaws that it has that I think are very fair to point out.
So like, are you saying, so like if you watch Dark City one time and I don't know, I can't see anybody finding any appeal in.
See,
I can acknowledge that you do, but I just really can't understand how that's possible.
I'm just saying, I did not expect, like I said, I did not expect to. I really expected to hate it. And I think it took me like 15 minutes, like it was like the first half hour. And then I realized I'm engrossed in this for some reason.
Oh man, I was so bored. I was forcing myself to watch it. In fact, there were many times I watched it with my son had gone to see it in the theater. My oldest, he was back for Christmas break, and we got it, Redboxed it, and I there were multiple times that I had stopped the movie just to complain about choices in the film, and it was probably a 3-hour ordeal watching that movie. And then at one point, I just like, that's it. I'm just not even going to comment anymore. And I think I actually pulled up Facebook and scrolled Facebook or Twitter while the rest of the movie played, because it was just so boring. It was horrid. I actually, when they did the big reveal of the carpet stretcher, I was like, really, that's the thing? I had to go back in the movie to like see, because I was like, that came out of nowhere. That's so stupid.
It does feel like it comes out of nowhere. That's
and,
one of the,
and then
that
I
really
had
is
to
the
go back
weakest
to
part
it, and
of
I'm
the
like,
film.
that's clearly a carpet stretcher. Why is this even a thing? And which ties into Abigail's comment. To be fair, why would Bruce Wayne be building a house? Because Bruce Wayne's entire family made all of their money in real estate. That's the dude's job. He doesn't.
I mean, you could
build
even
houses,
have like
but
a
he
fun
knows how
bit.
they're. He knows how
Right.
houses are built.
Is that
And
just
even
that
beyond
movie?
that,
Because I have
once again,
never heard of that.
You get.
Usually he's a tech guy or something.
No, he became a tech
No,
giant as a
that's very
backup to
new.
the other thing. That was a secondary business, because they're an umbrella corp. But yeah.
No, you
So,
could have like
once
a
again,
fun bit though, where he doesn't know what it is immediately, but he recognizes this as a tool, so he's like going home to look it up, and then like Alfred walks up, he's like, "Oh yes, I've used that to reupholster the mansion several times."
So even knowing that it's a rug puller doesn't tell you which rug to pull. That's what I'm saying. Like, what are you going to pull
the
every
one where
rug
he
in
found
Gotham?
it, maybe exactly the one where he found it,
But
which
it's-
is
but-
where they go back to.
No, I don't think that is the one. I think that's part of the weakness of the film, is that the rug he's supposed to pull is the one in the Riddler's apartment, which they only discover at the climax of the film. Right?
Oh, that's right. I forgot. This is the Riddler. There's gonna be. Oh.
So like, that's what I'm saying. Like, unless I mean, I could be wrong, but I thought that the whole thing was that he's supposed to use the rug pull.
But I haven't. Once again,
in the Riddler's
there was a
apartment.
point at which I quit watching it, like, actively.
I could be wrong. I'm just saying it was just bizarre, because it didn't even then, it just did not feel earned.
Rhys, you spoiled man. If you knew the horrendous films that I have sat and forced myself to finish just because I had started.
Yeah.
Just.
Okay.
No, I'm there with you. I don't like not finishing things most of the time.
Yeah, but your definition of good and bad is going to be very different from mine, because Metal and I are going to be able to probably sit through a Neil Breen film and say this is good.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I definitely have a much wider net than Cartoonicus does.
Anyway, I do want to touch back on the Nolan films for a second, because there was something interesting that happened. Now, Batman Begins is one of my favorite superhero movies ever, and certainly my favorite of the three in a way. Mainly because it's just that kind of movie. I love movies that make you think. And the fact that Batman Begins is centered around making sense of every single minute detail of Batman, and how, his costume and how he presents himself and why he has a rocket-powered car and all this stuff, right? As the films went on, most people would probably suggest that the films got more and more realistic and grittier and grittier, and more just like, it hardly was even a Batman movie, and at the point it was just like a gritty crime drama. By the time you get to the end, things are happening in broad daylight. We've gotten rid of the cartoonishly, orange sky at night and everything, right? But at the same time, things like his costume, his tech, and other things, much like a lot of our superhero, long-running franchises, MCU, etc., starts getting a lot more costumey and a lot less, specifically, efficient, and starts just looking like, classic superhero armor and stuff, and then weird, crazy flying machines. So it's strange. On one hand, you could say, yeah, it stripped some of that off for realism, but at the same time, somehow as it goes, it's doing the opposite for Batman himself.
Mm. I think that's part of it. I mean, Nolan was very much trying to capture the mythology of the characters, in the way he saw it. Now, I really feel, um, I've really come to believe that the Dark Knight is not a good picture, um,
Oh,
like at all.
Finally, someone who
Um,
agrees with
Yeah,
me.
yeah. I think
Wrong.
Twitless might be the only one on here that likes them.
wrong.
Oh,
Disagree.
really?
Yeah, no,
Very strong.
it's really hackneyed. The cinematography is really good, but the plot doesn't begin to make any sort of sense. The Joker's performance is really good. Actually, all the performances are pretty good. Maggie Gyllenhaal's so. Um, but the Aaron Eckhart is perfect.
It's a good
The-
take. I think it's a good take on Two-Face as well.
Yeah.
It's familiar, but it's different enough.
Yeah,
I think
the
it works, yeah.
the thing about it is
I like
that,
Oldman as Gordon.
yeah, Goldman. Okay, Oldman is
A very good actor.
in everything.
Yeah.
In
And
everything. I
everything
mean,
he's in. Yeah.
everything he's
He'd be in a
in.
horrible movie like Lost in Space, and he still does a great job.
He's the kind of he's like Sean Connery, right? In almost every film Connery does, even the schlocky ones, he elevates the picture, right? With the possible exception of the Avengers. Him and the Avengers, like the second half of that movie was just a miss. First half was I could not even leave the chair. It was so good. And I didn't even care about the characters, but just something about the whole thing. But man, by the second half of that movie, I was kind of over it. But Connery by and large,
let's stay on Goldman and Dark
with
Knight.
Oldman,
Trying to
but that's the
give
thing is,
example.
that's what I was gonna say, was Oldman is the same kind of character. I mean, same kind of actor.
Yeah.
Like, he elevates any role that he's in. Whether
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, there's
even-
a lot of actors like that who are just
Well, and
again
even, like,
testament
okay,
to the craft of
like
acting.
Fifth Element, right? His role in Fifth Element is so silly, right?
Oh yeah.
But
Zorg
he
here.
still sells it in a way that is like enthralling, right? And it's
Ian McShane's like that too. There's a
Well, and if we're-
there's like a list of actors.
Yep.
He doesn't put him in anything.
Well, and if we're going to talk about that, can we also talk about the greatest Alfred to ever grace our, the screen with his presence?
I think
Oh,
we've got some good Alfred.
that guy who was Alfred in the Gotham series, he was really
What?
good too.
I don't care. I am
That's
completely spoiled.
That guy was the only enduringly good character in that show.
So I never watched it, but all other Alfreds have been ruined for me after Michael Caine.
Michael Caine was good.
It doesn't matter what he looks like. I read him, and I'm going to hear Michael Caine's voice.
I think Jeremy Irons did a good job.
Jeremy Irons did an excellent job as well, and so did William Gough, right, in the '89 series. Yeah.
Andy Serkis did a good job.
Maybe I just love Michael Caine.
I think he's an odd choice. I think he was an odd choice. It's hard to look past him. It was hard to look past the Andy Serkisness of it. But in terms of playing an assistant butler character / father figure, Andy Serkis is a good actor too. So
anyway, yeah, one of the things that I really disliked about the Dark Knight, one of the things, there are several, but one of the things is that the first half of the movie felt very much like a detective story, and the second half of the movie, Batman stops being able to understand any sort of detectiving and relays himself to this supposedly morally questionable surveillance system, which was instantly funny because that's already how everything works anyway. So
right.
It's just like, yeah, we're gonna pretend Google isn't here. What are you stupid?
Right.
So that was one of the things. But yeah, a reason I bring that up specifically is that Isaac's comment here says, the way to do Batman as a detective would be have him solve the mystery as Bruce Wayne, no gadgets, just his mind. And that's one of the things that I felt was they were very close to accomplishing in Batman Begins and did not accomplish in Batman in the Dark Knight. And then the Dark Knight Rises, Batman can't figure anything out. He merely is popped along as other people do things to the movie. And his grit and personality win the day, but there's no thinking that is involved in that picture at all.
So the thing about both Dark Knight and again, I'm not going to say they're flawless pictures. The thing about I think Dark Knight does it better than Dark Knight Rises, because Dark Knight Rises, I think the mistakes start weighing it down. But both of those films are playing heavily with the symbolic and even mythic significance of the characters. And part of the reason why Batman can't get ahead in Dark Knight is the fact of he's not just fighting a mystery or even a person. He's fighting like this force of nature. Again, Joker says it himself when he says, "I'm an agent of chaos," and it's like I'm essentially a force that's metaphorical, that's come to act as a corrective to what Batman's force has brought to this city. And he's almost, and you're not supposed to take him as supernatural, but there is something preternatural about how things work out for Joker in that film.
Because it's unbelievable. I mean, that's
what I'm
so
saying.
Impossible and nonsensical that anything could possibly happen that way.
That's part of
like
the point.
He would have to be like a god. He would have to be
there's
Loki
a great video that
pull that off,
about
and
this,
he's
actually.
not.
But the thing is, I think that's consistent about all three movies, though. Like, I think all three movies kind of almost have a different type of force, but a force moving through it. So people just like that one the best. But if you're going to say it's a positive or a negative, you kind of have to be consistent about all three movies. Because even like Ra's al Ghul is almost a force in a different way.
True.
I think it works really well in The Dark Knight. I think it starts to... because obviously there's going to be limits to how symbolic you can be. At a certain point, the film does need to make a little more sense. And I think that the liberties they take with Bane being a force to be reckoned with really stretch way too far. Because when he has like the cops, every cop in Gotham all locked into the sewers, like I think Jim mentioned that, and it's like, okay, even allowing you some latitude with this metaphorical nature of these larger than life characters, no, I can't buy that one. So like I definitely, and most audience members, I think, feel that way about that film, because things like that get brought up a lot. The
difference is he manages to do that, and then those cops get out and they come back swinging. Nothing makes The Dark Knight any more pleasant to watch the Joker just win over and over and again, and just nothing good ever happens in the gosh darn movie. And I'm by the
That's
end,
not
I'm
true.
like,
Strong disagree. Strong disagree.
The
whole point.
There's one single good thing that happens in that movie, and that's that
the boat scene.
Jim Gordon's kids.
Yeah.
Jim Gordon's boy doesn't die. That's like it.
Strong disagree. The boat scene is the thing that it hangs its hat on.
That's unbelievable. That stretches credulity beyond the breaking point.
I disagree.
Still okay.
Absolutely. The heart of man is desperately wicked above all things. Who can know it? There is nothing believable about that picture.
The whole point. No. I have to take a little issue.
Because it only took one person, actually.
The whole point of superhero fiction is a fiction that people can not just have an aspirational hero, but could actually follow one. So the whole point of the setup there is that Joker hangs his hat on everyone being as bad as he is. And I know from a Christian perspective, we can like do an ontological kind of examination of that.
Everyone is as bad as the Joker. This is not hard to believe.
But in a superhero universe, that is
81 million people voted for Joe Biden. Yes, everybody is as bad as the Joker.
The pitch of a superhero universe, and this is consistent with the fiction of superheroes.
I'm actually with Twitless on this one.
Is that's not the case. And the Joker loses the biggest fight in that film. And he has nothing to say really about it except for, hey, I got Harvey Dent. Batman proves to him, I've got Gotham City. You didn't destroy them. They followed my lead.
I still need to see him tossed off that building and not saved.
No,
the worst part about it is that
he'd
he'd already been tossed off a building in a previous Batman movie, and that's how he died in that movie. So it was almost like this movie is stomping on that, saying, no, you were wrong. This is how it actually should happen.
Batman didn't toss Joker, okay? He falls off basically of his own accord. Well, actually, no, hold on. What do you think?
No, he cuts the rope.
Yeah, he was tied to the gargoyle, and then the gargoyle broke loose, and then defying all the laws of physics, he didn't just tear in half immediately.
I know, right?
And bleed out all over the floor. Instead, he held on and slipped down one rung of the rope off the helicopter, which also wouldn't be still standing there. And then another rung of the rope, and then finally fell, plunged to his death, and landed. And,
That's right.
And
I remember.
in one piece somehow. After
I'm not, the idea of like, I'm going to stop you from getting away because I'm going to tie you to something is fine with me. I actually do not like it's one of the things I think I don't like about that film of Batman essentially condemning him to die, because that's not
Batman would have just thrown a batarang and sliced the thing or whatever.
The point is that as a superhero, especially Batman in particular, Batman is a rehabilitative character, which makes him different than the Shadow. The Shadow, by the way, is the one who wields the 2 6-shooters.
Yes.
And he's like, crime is to be shot. Batman is, I've already dealt with personally the trauma of someone being shot, 2 people important to me being shot. I'm going to do something different. You can argue with him. You can say he's wrong. There are characters who have done that. The point of Batman is that he stands for that, and it works very well for a superhero universe.
The great thing about Batman Begins was that he had a breakthrough, and it ended up with, I won't kill you, I don't have to save you.
I was never the biggest fan of that take either.
Also, the Shadow does have a rehabilitative side, but he's got like this weird, like supernatural power to tell who can and can't be rehabilitated, and the ones that can become his agents. Like that's his rehabilitation program.
Yeah. So anyway, moving on from the Nolan films,
Sure.
Fizz says you apparently be skipping most of my comments, not on purpose. I'm just getting there are so many great comments that I'm trying to highlight a few and then talk back over them. And I'm probably, well, it is 9:00 and I'm still.
And this was also earlier, and while we were talking before going to the comments, I was the one that was also picking a bunch to show on screen, and I did show a couple of his shows.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm way on back there. It's already 9:00. Holy crap!
Yeah,
I'm never gonna catch up with stuff. So.
Fizz mentions that Dark Knight acknowledges the whole impossible aspect of his plans working with like the bank heist. It's kind of his, I guess, superpower is his crazy plans working.
I'm gonna.
Because that bank heist could never work. Ever.
I love it.
But it's great.
Heist.
It's a good heist. I like it from like a cinematic perspective.
Yeah.
But like
so
from a probability, like there's so many things that could go wrong that in real life it couldn't, and that's why it's something that can only exist in cinema.
I kill the bus driver. I love that.
Who right.
taught you to count?
The thing about the bank heist and why I bought the bank heist, and I still kind of think that was the perfect way to lead the picture in. Was because it actually made, I mean, like it more or less made sense, right? It was one of those things that like you could convince people for enough money, these criminals for enough money to just start taking people out one at a time, and there are enough dumb people in the world that they may figure that they're the last one. So then, like whatever, they'll keep doing their part of the plan, right? It's
basically good. What happens in Goodfellas, except it's just one guy knocking them all off one at a time.
Right.
Like it's
right. So, and so that's one of those things. Like that part was like, even though it's highly unlikely, it's still within the realm of possibility. But
however, it does seem like the plan is contingent on this one guy taking the time to hold the other guy up and say, I'll bet he paid me you to kill me, didn't he? And the other guy saying, no, I'm supposed to kill the bus driver, giving him enough time to actually do everything he does after that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's like that supernatural agent of chaos aspect of Joker, because I dislike how mythical the story is, but it also tries to take all of the pre-notions of supernatural and paranormal stuff out of Batman, like the Lazarus pits and stuff, when it's still just as mythic as the stuff that they're trying to remove.
So what's interesting to me, and I do accept this, I like Nolan's take. Nolan's trying to do he's trying to do essentially like, and I like this. I'm not saying everyone does. Nolan's vision appears to be, it's like these are the real stories that people make myths out of. These are the things that are larger than life that you know, they're so impossible, but they were real. And that guy who was actually, oh my gosh, he was a giant. And it's like, you know, well, he wasn't that big, but he was larger, you know, he was actually larger than life. And that's kind of what I think what Nolan's trying to create. And so you get this, like, it's
like the movie Big Fish.
It's a sense of the
I love
mythic.
Big Fish.
I love Big Fish too.
Without actually being supposedly fully mythic. And it's I think it's very Nolan, right? Like it's I think you see the same thing in kind of Inception as he interprets what dreams are like.
Yeah.
And because they're not dreams I've ever dreamed, but they are types of dreams that people do dream. You just have to have a brain that works like his, I guess.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
anyway,
I have like crazy liminal dreams like that all the time.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, I apologize, Rhys. I interrupted you earlier. So
No, it's fine. I can't remember what I was talking about. But
well, we were talking about the Joker's plan with the bus driver and everything.
Well, I was gonna say it's actually getting kind of late. I'm gonna have to bounce here in a second.
Yeah.
But feel free to continue talking about the Nolan films. That's gonna be that conversation will go all night.
Well, I posted a link that you can put in chat. Cracked just did a hilarious job of explaining how ridiculous the Joker's plan really is. But
that sounds like fun.
Fizz says he never remembers his dreams, which may have stunted his creativity.
That's unfortunate.
You're fine. It's fine.
A lot of people don't remember their dreams. Actually, people that have sleep apnea seldom remember their dreams.
Really?
So,
because you're always being woken up.
Yeah, because you don't actually necessarily get to deep REM, or it happens so shortly that you don't notice it.
If you are worried, if that's a concern of yours, I do recommend having a dream journal right next to your bed so that you can, whatever image you get, you can very quickly jot it down. Because as most people have had the experience of feeling, oh my gosh, I have this very vivid impression or dream idea, and then you lose it within the first, few minutes of waking. So.
Okay, so back in our conversation about Batman Beyond, Jim Tinner said, I still think of Big O as the end of the animated Bruce Wayne Batman.
I love
Big O.
I'm going to have to look
Big
this
O
up
is
to remind
great.
myself.
Oh, that's so funny. That's
Hold
so
on.
funny.
It's a giant robot story that's basically Japanese Batman with a giant robot.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Gotcha.
There's so many comments. Jim Tuna said Dr. Light has always sucked. Yeah, but for different reasons, right? Like the original Dr. Light was a very fun villain for the campy stories, right? And you could have those stories that just have that camp in them, and it's fine. But as they moved away from campy stories, they moved away from Dr. Light, and then they saddled him with the Teen Titans, which was ridiculous and silly. And then they put him in Suicide Squad because no one cared about him. And Ostrander, and I love Ostrander, but he felt the need to make every one of those characters have a super serious take. Right. Because some of them legitimately was a really good fit for them to have a serious take, but he could have left some of them silly and it would have been just fine. And once you have the super dark Dr. Light take that Ostrander put in there, then you got to do something else with him and explain how he was serious, and then he was silly, and then he was serious again, and then
we got that stupid reboot. I mean, what's it called? Retcon that they did.
Yeah, in the friggin' the whole reason behind Identity Crisis. And Meltzer, who is an amazing storyteller. I've read some of his novels. He's great, but man. That's just
I guess my thing is that there's more than one way to make a character a little more serious and give and I'm okay with making characters a little more serious depending on the storyline. But going back to what we talked about with Matt Reeves' Batman and so on, it's like I don't need these characters like becoming rapists I'm okay with that. I'm okay with us not leaving that door closed.
Well,
Yeah,
as
there you go. I mean, you could have a story where Dr. Light had a legitimate like a robbery story, like a heist story, and he's doing a serious heist, and he's not using his ineffective light power as his main impetus in that because he's hiring thugs or he's got whatever. Yeah, you could do that.
So a good version of looking at is I recently for another podcast that I'm doing, we were looking at Penguin, the show, and also looking at Penguin, some recent runs that have happened with that character. And part of that was me looking a little bit at just like Penguin a little over time. And, Golden Age Penguin is basically just kind of a Dick Tracy character.
Yes.
Like he's just, look, he looks like a penguin.
I've always felt that like so many of the Batman villains should just be Dick Tracy. Let's send him back to the 1930s and let's just do that.
They did that with the recent Amazon or HBO show. But so the thing is that Penguin started off being kind of just that character, and they've added some pathos and added some depth to him over time, like kind of like being like a bullied guy who looked kind of funky. His a mother who was sick, and they settled, I think, on him being a ruthless gangster, but who had, he'd had a hard life in some spots, and that gave some depth to him. But then when they go to a Penguin Painted Prejudice, and then when they build on that idea for the Penguin show, they end up turning him just into like kind of like a Norman Bates figure, and it's like you didn't have to go this far. You know what I mean? Like, this is not, I don't need Penguin being this type of gross, vulgar character. And that's essentially your point with Dr. Light. And here's the thing, once they've done that to Dr. Light,
right,
it's hard to come back from that because it's always like, you raped a woman.
Yep.
How do you
not only did you rape a woman, right? But the Justice League that has several cops on it, rather than report him to the authorities or kill him, right? They're just going to know, we're going to mind wipe everybody involved so that nobody knows about it. Yeah. So you really think like Barry
and all
Allen,
because it's a retcon, right?
Yeah.
Weird. It's weird. It
was one of those things where where Meltzer came up with this concept for a story, and no editor said, no, we're not doing that to Sue Dibney. No, we're not doing that to Jack Drake. We'll find a different way of telling your story, and work with it, because that's the thing is they had no concept, no care for the future of their universe, and it just makes me sad. Okay, I don't want to keep you too long. Twitless, there are 2 points back a few whiles ago. Isaac said, wasn't Bruce's dad a doctor? Yes, but his dad already had money from his father's real estate business. Yeah. Ethereal Dragon says you can't have secret passages if you don't build them yourself.
Yeah, but Alfred can. Alfred can build all the passages.
Alfred can. Yeah. Alfred can. What can Alfred do? Right?
Nothing.
Discipline Master Wayne properly.
Yeah.
No, I was saying he's the other one of the two.
Yeah. Well, there's more than just the two, though. Anyway, Najee, I just came in. Was Marm not able to make it? He was not, which is sad.
Relentlessly troll him on social media for that.
Well, I mean, he'll probably get back to me tomorrow. It was my fault. It was
make funny edits of all of his pictures.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Najee says Dark Knight was just okay. I agree.
Oh my gosh.
I overstate it, but yeah, it was just okay. I actually wrote a big long screed for it. That was one of the things we had to do in a film class I took. I have a big long screen I meant to reformat as a blog for my website, and I haven't done that yet. The last little film where he lost me, they captured all the police in the sewers. That's great.
You know what's funny? I think I'm pretty sure I have an essay on how good The Dark Knight is.
Love dueling essay night. That sounds fun. That sounds fun. I'll
have to see if I actually. I may have written one. I don't remember.
Well, if you do, that'd be great. I would love to have that as a show. We'll do dueling essay night. I've never heard of such a thing on a live stream, but we'll do it. By gum.
Is that like a slam poetry night, sort of?
Yes.
except way more boring.
Way more.
Oh, it's just hard to get more boring than slam poetry night.
All depends on the poets, I think.
Fair.
Okay.
The Wonder Woman comic is pretty up there.
Here we go. Isaac said about the Dark Knight, it's not the movie we want, it's the movie we deserve.
It's true.
No, that would actually be like the latest MCU movie.
That's part of my dissertation, essentially. By the way, Identity Crisis is 2004, which maps onto my trauma poetics of post 9/11 superhero comics.
That's so much fun. Well, how is it? I mean, how are you coming along with the dissertation? Is it going well?
I'm writing about Wonder Woman. I should have been doing that tonight, but
well, thanks for coming on and nerding out with us. Then we'll get yourself out of here. We'll finish with the comments without you. We've kept you long enough. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah. I will.
So we just trolled everybody tonight.
Yeah.
We did. Absolutely.
But thanks for having me. I will see you guys soon.
Absolutely. We'll catch you later, man.
Have a good night.
Have a good one. Million thanks to Twitless out there in the world for spending time with us when he could be doing homework. So,
yeah, I liked The Dark Knight Rises, though I must admit the last half hour to 40 minutes kind of saved it, admittedly.
I think so. I love monster, which is mythical in the metaphorical sense, but not in the literal sense.
That's a story we should cover sometime.
I'm not familiar with
it. It's great. I highly recommend people read it in manga form because it does get to be a little bit more detailed, but the adaptation covers it very closely. And it is about this. It's mostly like a program where they're trying to kind of make the next Hitler in the background. But what you get to see is that there's this serial killer who's kind of like a monster. He's missing a part of himself, and he doesn't really have a problem killing anything. He goes by the name of Johann, and a doctor who kind of feels guilty for saving this boy's life. And now he's trying to hunt this monster down, and there's a few other people involved. It's a great series. Actually, probably one of the best manga series like ever. I would put it up there.
Yeah. Right? Well, that sounds like a really high recommendation. This is in relation to me laughing at Isaac's comment earlier. Jim said that the statement works for the multiverse of madness. It was the movie we deserve.
Yeah, exactly.
For letting the MCU go on the way that it was. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I haven't seen any MCU movies since Endgame. I was so disappointed in Endgame. So
for different reasons.
I tried not to, but I was dragged to the theater a few times by out of town relatives, and it's really hard to say no when people come to visit you and then they want to do something.
Yeah, that's fair. That's really fair. So which ones have you seen then?
The first one I was forced to see Love and Thunder, which was awful. Yeah.
No, before that there was Black Widow.
I wasn't forced to see that one though.
And there was there also was that Ant-Man Quantumania was around that same time too. Didn't see that one either. I didn't see the second Ant-Man either.
Movies.
So I saw the first one. I enjoyed it, but
I agree that without even seeing
one came out, I was already pretty cool on things.
Everything that happened after Endgame just is slog.
I was I know this first Ant-Man movie came out just before Endgame, and I didn't care to see it. And then there was that Captain Marvel. I didn't care to see that either. I was pretty.
I'm not saying they weren't already having their problems, but at least I was able to watch.
No, I was saying I was really pretty much over it by the time the first trailer for Endgame dropped. It was just
like a nice bookend. Like it was just a place where you could stop.
Right. That's how I felt. Yeah. But I could also see every trailer, and
but I didn't like Infinity War.
I could see where they were going. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. They're going to completely go off the deep end. And then of course, hearing about them ever since, it's like, yep.
And part of it for me was I only went to Endgame because my sons really wanted to go. I actually had routinely said I am not interested in seeing Endgame but I will take you if you want.
We all know about your Captain America story.
Yeah. But yeah, and so the kids both wanted to go, so we went, and that's the only reason I saw it. But it was like, it was it was irritating, very irritating. But yeah, I was annoyed. But I did recently. What was it that I was going to talk about that I watched? Because I did recently see a movie that was not terrible. I can't remember what it was now. Jeez, it was super impactful.
Uh-oh.
Oh well.
It's the second
well.
time I've done that to you.
I watched Deadpool and Wolverine, and I thought it was all right. But I can like divorce the Deadpool movies from everything. So
Yeah.
really
I mean, that's got. I watched. I have not. I saw the Once Upon a Deadpool cut, the PG-13 cut of it.
Oh.
Because I was curious to see what they were doing with the framing sequences. Because they made such a big deal about that, and it was like I got it for like $10 or whatever, so it wasn't a huge loss. And so I have not seen the first Deadpool movie, and the second one I've seen edited down, which was enjoyable but not great. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, even like I saw the.
I'm not sad I saw it, but I probably won't watch it again.
I guess the uncut version in theaters. And actually, of the three, I think Deadpool 2 is the weakest of them. And that's mostly because of how they treated Domino more than anything. But aside from that, like they did a little bit more justice to some of the other characters than, say, like the Fox or Disney films did. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like its fun little side thing that you can just divorce from everything else.
Yeah, I agree. The Jim Tuner says the Deadpool Wolverine was the best MCU movie since Endgame, but it wasn't great. That's an interesting take. I appreciate
it does technically take place in the MCU, so
yeah. Let me ask you a question here. You mentioned that you didn't like what they did with Domino in Deadpool 2. What did you not like about it?
I think it's just like not the version of Domino that I'm used to. Because to me, like I remember Domino was the type of character who is kind of pissed all the time. Like mostly just around Wade anyway. Like she's done with Deadpool's shit more than anyone else. And it's like it's not even that they kind of like casted somebody else to be Domino, which like I wouldn't even care if you casted a black person. If you just body painted the whole, like anybody could technically be Domino, just body paint her whole body. But it was like more like the personality didn't match up with what I expected from Domino, and I just didn't like it.
See, and I've not had a lot of familiarity with Domino. She's shown up in a few books I've read, but nothing I've gotten really a good beat on the character, other than the fact that, like, you know, she's really she had a good relationship with Cable. She was like ultra competent in virtually everything, right?
It's because of her power of having luck.
Yes,
so everything just works out for her no matter what.
The thing about Domino is not just that everything works out. It's that she's confident in it, right?
Yeah.
So you have that cliche, I can't remember who said it, but that confidence is competence, right? And
I did like how they did her powers though, right? Because you're like, how are you going to show off luck-based powers on screen? And they kind of went like the Final Destination route, and I thought that was a good way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing about that I thought about the casting, about the design, like I understand that you could just paint anybody any color. But the thing that I kind of appreciated about it is if they cast a black gal, they wanted her to look black, right?
So they kind of did like the inverted
the color scheme
instead. Yeah.
And I at least appreciated the dedication to the.
I appreciated that part.
The bit. So like if your decision is and you know, there's no reason I had to think that was.
I actually thought they should have went forward if they're like more with it if they were going to do that, and they should have actually body painted her entire body black.
Like
jet black, like ebony. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Oh, I'm sure that would have gone over big.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they had
just, she was already black.
Yeah. If she was dark or light all over, if it was a body paint job like they did with Gamora, nobody would have said anything. Which is one of the funny things is the gal.
If she was green, yes. But
well,
or even if they being made blacker, like.
Well, the thing is if they would have body painted her black or body painted her white. She's not skin tone already.
Yeah.
And so that's the that's one of
I
the
see what you're
aspects of it,
getting.
right? So so whatever color they picked, it's not skin tone. So that takes some of the racial thing out of it. But in
it's
a side
literally
note,
supposed to be the ivory or ebony color of a domino. Like
yes. But the side note on all that, speaking about paint and costumes and everything else, I read the silliest thing on the internet a couple weeks ago. Apparently the actress who played Gamora no longer wants to play that role at all, but has gone on record saying that she is opposed to the character being recast by anybody who's not black.
That's
which
ridiculous.
is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because she's not playing a black character.
Whitewashing a white character, right?
Yeah, Gamora's not white; she's an alien, right? So like, she exists entirely.
She is green, like she's from a different planet.
Yeah, she lives entirely outside of America.
You're talking about Gamora?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were still talking about Domino.
Oh no,
we're talking about Gamora now.
About Gamora,
it'll be like it's like Starfire or anybody else. Like they're literally aliens. They're not white. They're not black. They're not Asian. They're not anything. They're from a completely different planet, different biological line.
Yeah, that's what it says. Gamora's green, so it doesn't even make any sense that anybody could play her. That's the whole point. Tank, thanks for showing up. Tank says Richard Garrison, the main collector of Buck Rogers and 1970s comic book art, died today, on Monday, I should say, from complications with Lewy body syndrome. He was my step grandfather. Man, that's a bummer. That's a bummer, man.
Something I never knew about you.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I'm not familiar with your step granddad, but that's a bummer, man. Yeah. Anyhow,
I'm sorry.
Not that I mean to bring the stream down or nothing, but
no, but I think that was worth.
But my condolences.
My condolences as well. So, well, I guess let's go ahead and wrap things up. Technically any actor could play Purple Man as well. Yes, I agree with that, Fizz. Purple Man, I don't think we've even seen on screen. I'm not sure how that would work out, but
well, we kind of did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Jessica Jones.
See,
David Tennant, and David Tennant was actually upset because he thought he was going to be painted purple, and they're like, "No, we're just gonna put you in like a suit, and maybe the suit will be purple, maybe the tie will be purple this time." And he's like, "Oh, I thought it was going to be all purple."
See, I did not see the
man. How often does an actor want to go through the?
Well, when you're a goofball like that, a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
I thought he did a great job, though. It's like, I would have liked to have seen him all purple.
Oh, there, Fizz points out Jessica Jones. So there you go. He wanted 3 hours of makeup. Yeah, he got paid for it. So I'm saying those British.
He is one of those like goofball guys. I mean, that's why he was on Doctor Who to begin with, and a bunch of other stuff.
So next week we are talking spy comics. Now this will not be my favorite spy comic show. We're just talking about the genre as a whole. We're going to be pulling out our collections maybe to share. I grabbed some of mine yesterday. I was digging through the file cabinets, picked some up here. So that'll be next week's show, and it'll be hopefully really fun. I know Hutch is excited about it, so we'll see how that shakes out from there.
If I show up, maybe I'll bring something contemporary.
Ooh. Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds great. So that's the show for this week. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know we did not have a proper topic because we changed everything.
It worked though. We had the vampires, Batman, right? And it's like,
oh man, we at least half of it. We were at least an hour talking about Batman adaptation.
There's kind of a theme.
So maybe I'll have to make a new thumbnail that has Batman on it. Actually, I'll bet I'll know what I'm going to do.
You can use that Lego Batman.
I'm going to use the Lego one. That'll be what it is. Okay, everybody, we're going to wrap it. We're going to call it there. You guys have a great night, and 'tis the season. Merry Christmas, everybody,
Merry
and
Christmas.
peace on earth, you guys. So, anyway, you guys have a good one.